Hey everybody, and welcome to this deep dive all about boosting your English speaking skills.
Yeah, we've got a lot of great tips today, all pulled from some really fascinating research.
It's amazing how simple some of these tips are. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel to make real progress.
That's so true. Sometimes the smallest changes can have the biggest impact.
Well, let's jump right in. The first tip we're going to tackle is this idea of thinking in English.
And this is so key.
Yeah.
It's really about shifting your mindset, rewiring your brain to default to English instead of translating everything in your head.
It's almost like switching your internal GPS to use English as its primary language.
I love that analogy
Yeah.
because it really is about changing those automatic thought patterns.
And the source even gives some practical examples of how to start doing this, like just narrating your day as you go through it.
Right. Or even labeling things around you in English.
Yeah.
Like table, chair, window.
It's all about immersing yourself in the language, even in those little everyday moments.
Exactly. And the more you do it, the more natural it will become.
All right, let's move on to the next tip, which is speaking out loud every day.
This is where the rubber meets the road. You can think in English all you want, but you've got to get those words out of your mouth.
It's like going to the gym for your speaking muscles. You need to exercise them regularly to build strength and stamina.
I like to think of it as building fluency momentum. The more you practice, the easier it becomes to speak without hesitation.
And the research actually recommends aiming for at least 10 to 15 minutes of speaking practice every day.
Even if it's just talking to yourself. Walking through your day, describing what you're doing.
Or reading aloud from a book or an article.
That's a great one. Or even pretending to give a presentation to an imaginary audience.
It might sound silly, but it's all about creating a safe space to practice and get those words flowing.
And you know what? The more you practice, the less silly it will feel.
Okay, so we've talked about thinking in English and speaking out loud. What's next on our list?
Let's dive into a technique called shadowing.
Oh yeah. This one's really interesting. It's basically about mimicking native speakers.
Exactly. You listen to a recording of someone speaking English, and then you try to repeat it as closely as possible.
You're trying to match their pronunciation, their rhythm, their intonation, everything.
It's like you're their shadow, trying to mirror their every move.
It's almost like a vocal workout for your English.
And it's incredibly effective for developing those subtle aspects of fluency that go beyond just knowing the words.
The source actually recommends using things like short speeches or interviews or TED Talks as good shadowing material.
I think those are great choices because they offer such a variety of speaking styles and topics.
Right, and you can really focus on those nuances of pronunciation and delivery that make native speakers sound so natural.
It's like you're absorbing their fluency by osmosis.
Okay, so we've covered thinking, speaking, shadowing. What's next on our fluency adventure?
Let's talk about learning phrases, not just words.
Okay, this is a big one because it's really about understanding how English is actually spoken in the real world.
Right. Native speakers don't just string together individual words. They use phrases and expressions and idioms.
It's like learning the secret code of fluency.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the beauty of learning phrases is that they give you those ready-made chunks of language that you can use in different situations.
So instead of just saying happy, you could say, I'm over the moon, or I'm on cloud 9.
It adds so much more color and personality to your language.
And it makes you sound more natural and less like you're translating everything in your head.
Right, because you're thinking in those chunks of language rather than individual words.
All right, so how do we actually start putting this into practice?
Well, the source recommends building your own personal phrase book. Just start collecting phrases and expressions that you hear native speakers using.
And make a conscious effort to use them in your own conversations.
Even if it feels a little awkward at first, the more you use them, the more natural they will become.
All right, let's move on to our next tip, which might make some people a little nervous.
Oh yeah, this one's a bit of a challenge, but it's so powerful.
It's record yourself speaking.
It can feel strange at first, but trust me, it's worth it.
It's all about becoming more self-aware, really listening to how you sound.
Exactly. Because sometimes we don't realize our own speaking habits until we hear them played back to us.
It's like looking in a mirror for your voice.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you know what? By listening to those recordings, you can identify areas where you're doing well and areas where you might need a little bit of work.
The source recommends picking a topic and just speaking for a few minutes, recording yourself, and then listening back.
You can talk about your day or your hobbies, or even just read a passage from a book.
And as you listen, pay attention to things like your pauses, your pronunciation, your overall fluency.
Are you speaking too fast or too slow? Are you stressing the right syllables? Are you using those phrases we talked about?
It's a fantastic tool for self-correction.
Absolutely. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll become with hearing your own voice and identifying areas for improvement.
Okay, so we've talked about thinking, speaking, shadowing, learning phrases, recording ourselves. That's a lot.
It is. But we're just getting started. We still have a few more tips to cover.
Well, let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into the next one, which is all about engaging in conversations with native speakers.
Now, this is where the real magic happens, because there's no substitute for real-life interaction.
It's like taking your English skills out for a test drive, putting them to work in the real world.
And the source actually highlights a couple of really cool platforms for connecting with native speakers.
Like HelloTalk and Tandem, which are basically language exchange apps.
Exactly. You can find language partners from all over the world who are also looking to practice their English.
And you can chat with them through text messages or voice calls or even video chats.
It's a fantastic way to immerse yourself in the language and get exposed to different accents and conversational styles.
And don't underestimate the power of those real-time conversations, where you have to think on your feet and respond in the moment.
It's the ultimate fluency boot camp.
All right, let's move on to tip number 7, which focuses on vocabulary. It's called expand your vocabulary and use it.
Because, let's face it, words are the building blocks of language. The more words you know, the more effectively you can express yourself.
But it's not just about memorizing long lists of words. It's about actually using those words in your everyday speech.
That's the key. And the source actually suggests a fun little challenge. Try to learn 5 new words every day and then find ways to use them in conversations or in writing.
It's like a daily vocabulary workout.
Exactly. And it helps those words stick in your memory because you're actively using them.
Yeah? Ready for some fun?
Oh yeah, this one's a classic.
It's practice with tongue twisters.
Now, you might be thinking, tongue twisters, are those really helpful? But trust me, they are.
It's like a targeted workout for your mouth muscles. They help you develop precision and clarity in your pronunciation.
Exactly. Because tongue twisters force you to focus on those tricky sound combinations that can be difficult for non-native speakers.
The classic example is she sells seashells by the seashore.
Right. But there are tons of others out there. And as you get better, you can find more challenging ones.
It's all about pushing your boundaries and having fun while doing it.
And who knows? You might even impress your friends with your newfound tongue-twisting skills.
All right, let's move on to our penultimate tip, which is a really fun one. It's watch movies and imitate actors.
This is a great way to combine entertainment with learning. Because who doesn't love watching movies?
And the source actually suggests watching movies with English subtitles, but muting the audio.
So you can really focus on the actors' facial expressions and body language and how they deliver their lines.
It's like a masterclass in pronunciation and expression.
Exactly. And you could even try acting out the scenes yourself, mimicking the actor's intonation and emphasis.
It's a really fun and engaging way to practice your English.
And you might even pick up some new vocabulary and phrases along the way.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about thinking, speaking, shadowing, learning phrases, recording ourselves, engaging in conversations, expanding our vocabulary, practicing with tongue twisters, and watching movies.
But there's one final tip that's absolutely crucial for success in any language learning journey.
And that is patience and motivation.
Because learning a language takes time and effort and dedication. There will be times when you feel frustrated or discouraged, but it's important to remember why you started in the first place.
Connect back to your goals and remind yourself of all the amazing things you'll be able to do once you achieve fluency.
And celebrate those small wins along the way. Every step forward is a step in the right direction.
I love that. So even if you just learn one new word today or you practice speaking for 5 minutes, that's something to be proud of.
Absolutely. And remember, progress, not perfection, is the key.
It's all about enjoying the journey.
Exactly. And embracing the challenges along the way, because that's where the real growth happens. We covered so much ground already. It's exciting to see how many different techniques there are for boosting your English fluency.
It really is a multifaceted skill.
Yeah.
There's the thinking aspect, the speaking aspect, the listening aspect.
And they all work together.
Yeah.
It's like a puzzle where each piece is important.
Out of all the tips we've discussed so far, is there one that's particularly resonating with you?
That's a tough one. I think they're all valuable in their own way. But if I had to choose, I'd say that the idea of making English a part of your daily life is really powerful.
I agree. It's about weaving it into your routine, finding those little moments throughout the day to practice.
It doesn't have to be this big formal thing. It can be as simple as listening to an English podcast while you're cooking dinner.
Or reading an English article on your lunch break.
Exactly. It's all about those little consistent efforts that add up over time.
One tip that we talked about that I think is really helpful, but also a little bit intimidating, is recording yourself speaking.
Oh, yeah. I know what you mean. It can feel a little awkward at first.
But it's so valuable for self-awareness. Actually hearing how you sound.
It's like holding a mirror up to your voice.
And sometimes we have no idea how we sound to others until we hear ourselves.
Exactly. And by listening back to those recordings, you can pinpoint areas where you're doing well and areas where you might need a little bit of work.
Like maybe you realize that you're speaking too fast or you're not pausing enough between phrases.
Or maybe you notice that you're not stressing the right syllables in certain words.
It's all about becoming more conscious of those little details that contribute to fluency.
And once you're aware of them, you can start working on them.
So it's not about being perfect, it's about progress.
Absolutely. And every little improvement gets you one step closer to your goal.
One of the tips that I'm really excited to try is the one about acting out scenes from movies.
Oh yeah, that one sounds fun.
It's such a creative way to practice pronunciation and expression, really getting into the emotions of the characters.
And it forces you to pay attention to those nonverbal cues like facial expressions and body language.
Which are so important for communication.
It's true. We communicate so much more than just words.
And those nonverbal cues can really enhance your understanding of the language.
So it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it.
Speaking of real-life communication, we talked about the importance of engaging in conversations with native speakers.
And that's really where the rubber meets the road. You can practice all you want on your own, but nothing beats real-life interaction.
It's like taking your English skills out for a test drive.
And those conversations don't have to be super formal or structured.
You could chat with a neighbor or a colleague, or even just strike up a conversation with someone at the coffee shop.
And you know what those casual conversations are? Often the best way to learn, because you're not so focused on being perfect.
You're just being yourself and letting the language flow.
I remember when I was learning experts' native language, I used to get so nervous about making mistakes.
Oh, I know that feeling.
But then I realized that native speakers make mistakes all the time. It's part of being human.
And they're usually very understanding and patient with language learners.
Absolutely. They know what it's like to be in your shoes.
So don't be afraid to put yourself out there and make those connections.
Because the more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
And that confidence will really shine through in your speaking.
It's like a positive feedback loop. The more you practice, the more confident you become, and the more confident you become, the more you want to practice.
It's all about building that momentum.
And remember, learning a language is a journey. It's not about reaching a destination, it's about enjoying the ride.
Well said. So let's keep those conversations flowing and those English muscles working.
Absolutely. And until next time, happy practicing.
Hearing your stories about learning experts' native language, it really brings it home. It's like anyone can do this. It's not some magical talent. It's just putting in the work.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, we've talked about so many different approaches today, right? From that mental shift of thinking in English all the way to, actually getting out there and having those real conversations.
It's like we've given our listeners a whole toolkit, right? They can pick and choose what works for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And try different things,
Yeah.
Experiment a bit and see what clicks for you.
It's all about finding what resonates with your own learning style, right?
Yeah.
Some people might love those tongue twisters. Others might be more drawn to shadowing,
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to language learning.
And the source really emphasizes that this is a journey, right? There are going to be bumps in the road, moments of frustration,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's part of the process, right? You can't let those setbacks discourage you.
It's like learning to ride a bike. You're going to fall a few times before you get the hang of it.
Exactly. And the important thing is to just keep getting back on that bike.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this question. What's one small step you can take today to move closer to your goal of speaking English fluently?
That's such a great question. Could be anything. It could be as simple as committing to learning one new word today.
Or maybe it's finally signing up for that language exchange app you've been thinking about.
Or even just watching a 5-minute video in English.
Whatever it is, just take that first step. And remember, every little bit of effort counts.
Absolutely. It all adds up over time.
Well, we've covered a ton of ground today. I hope our listeners are feeling inspired and motivated to take their English speaking to the next level.
Me too. And remember, fluency is within your reach. Just keep practicing, keep learning, and keep those conversations flowing.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of English fluency. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.